Harry Potter, Chapter 7, The Sorting Hat. The door swung open at once. A tall black-haired witch in emerald green robe stood there. She had a very stern face, and Harry first thought this was not someone to cross. "The first year, Professor McGonagall," said Hagrid. "Thank you, Hagrid. I'll take them from here." She pulled the door wide. The entrance hall was so big you could have fitted the whole of the Dursley house in it. The stone walls were lit with flaming torches like the one at Gridget. The ceiling was too high to make out, and a magnificent marble staircase facing them led to the upper floor. They followed Professor McGonagall, shown the first year, into a small empty chamber of the hall. They crowned it, and standing rather close together than they would usually have done, peering about nervously. "Welcome to Hogwarts," said Professor McGonagall. "The start of term banquet will begin shortly, but before you take your seat in the Great Hall, you'll be sorted into your houses. The sorting is a very important ceremony because while you are here, your house will be something like your family within Hogwarts. You will have classes with the rest of your houses, sleep in your houses, the dormitory, and spend... Oh, I forgot to turn on, yeah. Is that better? I'm very sorry, guys. I forgot. Sleep in your houses, dormitory, and spend your time in your house's common room. The four houses are called Gryffindor, Hufflepuff, Ravenclaw, and Slytherin. Each house has its own noble history, and each has produced outstanding witch and wizard. While you are at Hogwarts, your trump will be earn your house point, while any rule breaking will lose house point. At the end of the year, the house with the most point is awarded the house cup, a great honor. I hope each of you will be credited to whichever houses become yours. The sorting ceremony will take place in a few minutes in front of the rest of the school. I suggest you all smarten yourself up as much as you can while you're waiting." Her eyes lingered for a moment on Neville's cloak, which is fastened under his left ear, and on Ron's smudged nose. Harry nervously tried to flatten his hair. "I shall return when we are ready for you," said Professor McGonagall. "Please wait quietly." She left the chamber. Harry swallowed. "How exactly do they sort us into the houses?" he asked Ron. "Some sort of test, I think. Fred said it hurt a lot, but I think he was joking." Harry's heart gave a horrible jolt. A test in front of the whole school? But he didn't know any magic yet. What on earth would he have to do? He hadn't expected something like this. The moment they arrived, he looked around anxiously and saw that everyone else looked terrified too. No one was talking very much except Hermione Granger, who was whispering very fast about all the spells she'd learned and wondering which one she would need. Harry tried hard not to listen to her. He'd never been more nervous, never, not even when he'd had to take a school report home to the Dursley saying that he'd somehow turned his teacher wig blue. He kept his eyes fixed on the door. Any second now, Professor McGonagall would came back and lead him to his doom. Then something happened which made him jump about a foot in the air. Several people behind him screamed. "What the?" he gasped. So did the people around him. About 20 ghosts had just streamed through the back wall. Purely white and slightly transparent, they glided across the room talking to each other and hardly glancing at the first year. They seemed to be arguing. What looked like a fat little monk was saying, "Forgive and forget. I say we ought to give him a second chance. My dear Fairy, haven't we given Peeve all the chance he deserved? He gave us all a bad name, and you know he's not really even a ghost. I say, what are all doing here?" A ghost wearing a ruff and tight suddenly noticed the The first year, nobody answered. New students, said the fat fear, smiling around at them. About to be sorted, I suppose. A few people nodded mutely. Hope to see you in Hufflepuff, said the fear. My old house, you know. Move along now, said her sharp voice. The sorting ceremony about to start. Professor McGonagall had returned. One by one, the ghosts floated away through the opposite wall. Now, form a line, Professor McGonagall told the first year, and follow me. Feeling oddly as though his leg had turned to lead, Harry got into line behind a boy with sandy hair, with Ron behind him, and they walked out of the chamber, back across the hall, and through a pair of double doors in the great hall. Harry had never even imagined such a strange and splendid places. It was lit by thousands and thousands of candles, which were floating in the mid-air over 4 long tables, where the rest of the students were sitting. These tables were laid with glittering golden plates and goblets. At the top of the hall was another long table where the teachers were sitting. Professor McGonagall led the first year up here, so that they came up to halt in line facing the other student. With the teacher behind them, the hundreds of faces staring at them looked like the pale lantern in a flickering candlelight, dotted here and there among the students. The ghosts shone misty silver, mainly to avoid all the staring eyes. Harry looked upward and saw a velvety black ceiling, dotted with a star. You heard Hermione whisper, "It's bewitched to look like the sky outside I read about in the Hogwarts history." It was no hard to believe there was ceiling there at all, and that the great hall didn't simply open onto the heaven. Harry quickly looked down again as Professor McGonagall suddenly placed a 4-legged stool in front of the first year. On top of the stool, she pointed up. She put a pointed wizard hat. This head was patched and frayed and extremely dirty. Aunt Petunia wouldn't have let it in the houses. Maybe they had to try and get a rabbit out of it, Harry thought wildly. They seemed the sort of thing, noticing that everyone in the hall was now staring at the hat. He stared at it too. For a few seconds, there was a complete silence. Then the hat twitched. A rip near the brim opened wide like a mouth, and the hat began to sing. Oh, you may not think I'm pretty, but don't judge on what you see. I'll eat myself if you can find a smarter hat than me. You can keep your bowler black, your top hat sleek and tall, for I'm the Hogwarts sorting hat, and I can cap them all. There's nothing hidden in your head the sorting hat can't see. So try me on, and I'll tell you where you ought to be. You might belong in Gryffindor, where dwell the brave at heart, their daring nerve and chivalry set Gryffindor apart. They might belong in Hufflepuff, where they are just and loyal. Those patient Hufflepuff are true and unafraid of toil. Or yet in wise old Ravenclaw, if your ready mind, where those of wit and learning will always find their kind. Or perhaps in Slytherin you'll make your real friends. Those cunning folk could use any means to achieve their ends. So put me on, don't be afraid, and don't get in a flap. You're in safe hand, though I have none, for I'm a thinking cap. The whole heart burst into applause as the hat finished its song. It bowed to each of the 4 tables and then became quite still again. So we've just got to try on the hat, Ron whispered to Harry. I'll call Fred. He was going on about wrestling a troll. Harry smiled weakly. Yes, trying on that hat was a lot better than having to do a spell, but he did wish they could have tried it on without everyone watching. The hat seemed to be asking rather a lot. Harry didn't feel brave or quick-witted or any of it at the moment. If only the hat had mentioned a house for people who felt a bit queasy, that would have been one for himself. Professor McGonagall now stepped forward, holding a long roll of parchment. When I call your name, you'll put on the hat and sit on the stool to be sorted, she said. Ah, but Hannah, a pink-faced girl with blonde pigtails stumbled out of a line, put on the hat, which fell right down over her eyes, and sat down a moment and paused. Hufflepuff! Shouted the hat. The table on the right cheered and clapped as Hannah went to sit down the Hufflepuff table. Harry saw the ghost of the fat fairy waving merely at her. Bones, Susan? Hufflepuff! Shouted the hat again, and Susan scuttled off to sit next to Hannah. Boot, Cherry, Ravenclaw! The table second from the left clapped this time. Several Ravenclaws stood up to shake hands with Cherry as he joined them. Lockhurst Mandy went to Ravenclaw too, but Brown Lavender became the first new Gryffindor, and the table on the far left exploded with cheers. Harry could see Ron, twin brother Catling, Bulstrode Michelin, then became a Slytherin. Catcalling, and then became a Slytherin. Perhaps it was Harry's imagination. After all, he'd heard about Slytherin, but he thought they looked unpleasant a lot. He was starting to feel definitely sick now. He remembered being picked for team during sport lesson at his school. At his old school, he had always been last to be chosen, not because he was no good, but because no one wanted Dudley to think they liked him. Fletchley's Justin? Hufflepuff. Hufflepuff! Sometime Harry noticed the hat shouted at the house at once, but at other it took a little while to decide. Finnegan Simius, the sandy-haired boy next to Harry in the line, sat on the stool for almost a whole minute before the hat declared him a Gryffindor. Hermione almost ran to the stool and jammed the hat eagerly on her head. Gryffindor! Shouted the hat. Ron groaned. A horrible thought struck Harry, as horrible thoughts always do when you're very nervous. What if he wasn't chosen at all? What if he just sat there with the hat over his eyes for age? Until Professor McGonagall jerked it off his head and said there had obviously been a mistake, and had better get back on the train. When Neville Longbottom, the boy who kept losing his toes, was called, he fell over on his way to the stool. His hat took a long time to decide with Neville. When it finally shouted Gryffindor, Neville ran off, still wearing it, and had to jog back at Michael Ladder to give it to McDonald Morga. Malfoy swag forward when his name was called and got his wish at once. The hat had barely touched his head when it screamed, Slytherin! Malfoy went to join his friend, Gravy and Goyle, looking pleased with himself. There weren't many people left now. Maud, Nod, Parkinson, then a pair of twin girls, Puddle and Paddle. Then Perks, Sally, Ann, and then, at last, Porter, Harry. As Harry stepped forward, whispers suddenly broke out like little hissing fire all over the hall. Porter, did she say? The Harry Potter? The last thing Harry saw before the hat dropped over his eyes was a hall full of people cramming to get a look at him. Next second, he was looking at the black inside of the hat. He waited. Said a small voice in his ear. Difficult, very difficult. Plenty of courage, I see, and not a bad mind either. There's talent. Oh my goodness, yes, and a nice thirst to prove yourself. Now that's interesting. So where shall I put you? Harry gripped the edge of the stool and thought, not Slytherin, not Slytherin, not Slytherin, huh? Said a small voice. Are you sure? You couldn't be great, you know. It's all here in your head, and Slytherin will help you on the way to greatness. No doubt about that. No. Well, if you're sure, better be Gryffindor! Harry heard the hat shout the last word to the whole hall. He took off the hat and walked shakily toward the Gryffindor table. He was so relieved to have been chosen and not to put in Slytherin. He hardly noticed that he was getting the loudest cheer yet. Percy, the prefect, got up and shook his hand viciously, while the Weasley twin yelled, We got Porter! We got Porter! Harry sat down opposite the ghost in the rough he had been seen earlier. The ghost patted his arm, giving Harry the sudden, horrible feeling he'd just plunged on the bucket of ice-cold water. He could see the high table properly now. At the end nearest him sat Hagrid, who caught his eyes and gave him a thumbs up. Harry grinned back, and there in the center of the high table, in the large gold chair, Albus Dumbledore, Harry recognized at once from the card he had just got out of the chocolate frock on the train. Dumbledore's silver hair was the only thing in the whole hall that shone as brightly as the ghost. Harry spotted Professor Quirrell, too, the nervous man from Leaky Cauldron. He was looking very peculiar at a large purple turban. And now there was only 3 people left to be sorted. Turpin, Lisa, became a Ravenclaw, and then it was Ron's turn. He was pale green by now. Harry crossed his finger under the table, and a second later the hat had shouted, "Gryffindor!" Harry clapped loudly with the rest as Ron collapsed into the chair next to him. "Well done, Ron! Excellent!" said Percy Weasley, promptly across Harry's Sabiny Blaze was made a Slytherin. Professor McGonagall rolled up her scroll and took the sorting hat away. Harry looked down at his empty gold plate. He had only just realized how hungry he was. The pumpkin pasty seemed age ago. Albus Dumbledore had got to his feet. He was beaming at the student, his arms open wide, as if nothing could have pleased him more than to see them all there. "Welcome," he said. "Welcome to New Year at Hogwarts. Before we begin our banquet, I would like to say a few words. Here are they. Nitwit, Blubber, Oddman, Tweak. Thank you," he said though. Everybody clapped and cheered. Harry didn't know whether to laugh or not. "Is he a bit mad?" he asked Percy uncertainly. "Mad?" said Percy airily. "He's a genius. Best wizard in the world. He's a bit mad, yes. Potatoes, Harry?" Harry's mouth fell open. The dish in front of him were now piled with food. He had never seen so many things he'd like to eat on one table: roast beef, roast chicken, pork chop, lamb chops, sausage, bacon, steak, boiled potatoes, roast potatoes, chips, Yorkshire pudding, peas, carrot, gravy, ketchup, and, for some strange reason, mint humbugs. The Dursley had never exactly starved Harry, but he had never been allowed to eat as much as he liked. Dudley had always taken anything that Harry really wanted, even if it made him sick. Harry piled his plate with a bit of everything except the humbugs and began to eat. It was all delicious. "That does look good," said the ghost in the rough sadly, watching Harry cut up his steak. "Can't you?" "I haven't eaten for nearly 500 years," said the ghost. "I don't need to, of course, but no one does miss it. I don't think I've introduced myself. Sir Nicholas Headless Nick." "I would prefer you to call Sir Nicholas the Mimsy," the ghost began stiffly. The Mimsy porpoising at your serve, reserving ghost of Gryffindor Tower." "I know who you are," said Ron suddenly. "My brother told me about you. You're nearly Headless Nick." "I would prefer you to call me Sir Nicholas de Mimsy," the ghost began stiffly. But Sandy here Samius interrupted. "Nearly headless? How can you be nearly headless?" Sir Nicholas looked extremely miffed, as if their little chat wasn't going at all the way he wanted. Like this," he said irritably. He seized his left ear and pulled. His whole head swung off his neck and fell onto his shoulder as if it was on the hitch. Someone had obviously tried to behead him, but not done properly. Looking pleased at the stunned look on their face, nearly headless Nick flipped his head back onto his neck, coughed, and said, "So, new Gryffindor, I hope you're going to help us win the house championship this year." Gryffindor have never gone so long without winning. "Slytherin, I have got the cup 6 years in a row." The bloody Baron became most unbearable. "He's a Slytherin ghost." Harry looked over at the Slytherin table and saw a horrible ghost sitting there with blank, staring eyes. a gaunt face and robe stained with silver blood. He was right next to Malfoy, who Harry was pleased to see. He didn't look too pleased with the seeing arrangement. "How did he get covered in blood?" asked Seamus with a great interest. "I've never asked," said nearly headless Nick delicately. When everyone had eaten as much as they could, the remaining half of the food faded from the plate, leaving them sparkling clean as before. A moment later, the pudding appeared, block of ice cream in every flavor you could think of. Apple pies, you could think of apple pies, tarts, chocolate, eclair and jam donut, truffle, strawberries, jelly, rice pudding. As Harry helped himself to charcoal tart, the talk turned to their families. "I'm half and half," said Simius. "Me, Dad, a Muggle. Ma'am didn't tell him she was a witch till after they were married. Bit of a nasty shock for him." The other laughed. "What about you, Neville?" said Ron. "My gran bought me up, and she's a witch," said Neville. But the family thought I was all Muggle for the age. My great uncle and Alich kept trying to catch me off my guard and force some magic out of me. He pushed me up the end of Blackpool Pier once. I nearly drowned, but nothing happened till I was 8. Great Uncle Angel came round for tea, and he was hanging me out of an upstairs window by angle when my great auntie offered him a marriage, and he accidentally let go, but it bounced all the way down the garden into the road. They were all ready, please. Gran was crying. She was so happy, and you should have seen their face when I got in here. They thought I might not be magic enough to come, you see. Great Uncle Alex was so pleased he bought me my toad." On Harry's other side, Percy, Weasley, and Hermione were talking about lesson. "I do hope they start straight away. There's so much to learn. I'm particularly interested in transfiction. You know, turning something into do something, of course. It's supposed to be very difficult. We'll be starting small, just matching the needle, that sort of thing." Harry was starting to feel warm and sleepy. Looked up at the high table again. Hagrid was drinking deeply from his goblet. Professor McGonagall was talking to Professor Dumbledore. Professor Quirrell, in his absurd turban, was talking to a teacher with gravy black hair, a look, nose, and sallow skin. It happened very suddenly. The hook-nosed teacher looked past Quirrell Turban straight into Harry's eyes, and a sharp, hot pain shot across his scar on Harry's forehead. "Ouch!" Harry clapped a hand onto his head. "What is it?" asked Percy. Nothing. The pain had gone as quickly as it had come. Harder to shake off the feeling Harry had got from all the teacher look. A feeling that he didn't like Harry at all. "Who's that teacher talking to Professor Quirrell?" he asked Percy. "Oh, you know Quirrell already, do you? No wonder he's looking so nervous. That's Professor Snape. He teaches poison, but he doesn't want to. Everyone knows after Quirrell's job, he know an awful lot of dark arts. Snape." Harry watched Snape for a while, but Snape didn't look at him again. At last, the pitting two disappeared, and Professor Dumbledore got his feet again. The hall fell silent. "Ahem. Just a few more words. We are all fed and water. I have a few sort of term notice to give you. First, you should note that the forest in the ground is forbidden to all pupils, and a few of our older students would do well to remember that as well." Dumbledore's twinkling eyes flashed in the direction of Weasley twin. "I have also been asked by Mr. Flinch, the caretaker, to remind you all that no magic should be used between class in the corridor. Quidditch trial will be held in the second week of term. Anyone interested in playing for their house team should contact Madame Hooch. And finally, I must tell you that this year the third floor corridor on the right-hand side is out of bound to everyone who does not wish to die a very painful death." Harry laughed, but he was one of the few who did. "He's not serious," he muttered. "Percy." "Must be," said Percy, frowning at Dumbledore. "It's odd, because he usually gives us reason why we're not allowed to go Somewhere, the forest full of dangerous beasts. Everyone know that. I do think he might have told us perfect at least. And now, before we go to bed, let us sing the school song, cried Dumbledore. Harry noticed that the other teacher's smile had become rather fixed. Dumbledore gave his wand a little flick as if he trying to get a fly off the end, and its long golden ribbon flew out of it, which rose high above the table and twisted itself snake-like into a word. Everyone picked a favorite tune, said Dumbledore, and off we go. The school bellowed, Hogwarts, Hogwarts, hockey, hockey, Hogwarts, teach us something, please. Whether we old and bold. Okay, I can't sing this song. I just remember the very first part, like Hogwarts, Hogwarts, hoggy, hoggy, Hogwarts, hockey, warty, Hogwarts. Okay. Everybody finished the song at different time. At last, only the Weasley twins were left singing along to a very slow funeral march. Dumbledore conducted their very last few lines with his wand, and when they had finished, he was one of those who clapped loudest. Ah, music! He tried, wiping his eyes. And magic beyond all we do here. And now at bedtime, off you trot. The Gryffindor first year followed Percy through the chattering crowded at the great hall and up the marble staircase. Harry Legward like lead again, but only because he was so tired and full of food. He was too sleepy even to be surprised that the people in their portrait along the corridor whispered and pointed as they passed, or that twice Percy led them through the doorway hidden behind the sliding panel and high hanging tapestries. They climbed more staircase, yawning and dragging their feet, and Harry was just wondering how much farther they had to go when they came to a sudden halt. A bundle of walking stick was floating in mid-air ahead of them, and as Percy took a step toward it, and they started throwing themselves at him. Peeve, Harry whispered at the first year. Peeve, Percy whispered to the first year. Apple racer. He raised his voice. Peeve, show yourself. A loud, rude sound like the air being let out of a balloon answered. Do you want me to go to the bloody Baron? There was a pop, and a little man with a wicked dark eyes and a wide mouth appeared, floating across the leg in the air, clutching the walking stick. Ooh, he said with an evil cackle. Ickle firsty, what fun! He swooped suddenly at them. They all duck. Go away, Peeve, or the Baron will hear about this. I mean it, barked Percy. Peeve stuck out his tongue and vanished. Dropping the walking stick on Neville's head, they heard him zooming away, rattling coat of armor as he passed. You want to watch out for Peeve, said Percy as they set off again. The bloody Baron, the only one who can control him. He won't even listen to us, perfect. Here we are. At the very end of the corridor hung a portrait of a very fat woman in a pink silk dress. Password, she said. Caput Draconis, said Percy, and the portrait swung forward to reveal a round hole in the wall. They all scrambled through it. They all needed a leg up and found themselves in the Gryffindor common room. A cozy fountain full of squashy armchair. Percy directed the girl through the one door to their dormitory, and the boys through another. At the top of a spiral staircase, they were obviously in one of the towers. They found their bed at last. Five or fourth poster hung with deep red velvet curtain. Their trunk had already been brought up too. Too tired to talk much, they pulled on their pajamas and fell into bed. Great food is in it, Ron muttered to Harry through the hanging. Get off, Scabber. He's chewing my sheet. Harry was going to ask Ron if he had any treacle tart, but he fell asleep almost at once. Perhaps Harry had eaten a bit too much, because he had a very strange dream. He was wearing Professor Quirrell's turban, which kept talking to him, telling him he must transfer to Slytherin at once, because it was his destiny. Harry told the turban he didn't want to be in Slytherin. It got heavier and heavier. He tried to pull at it off the Titan painfully, and there was Malfoy laughing at him as he struggled with it. Then Malfoy turned into a hook-nosed teacher, Snape, whose laugh became high and cold. There's a burst of green light, and Harry woke, sweating and shaking. He rolled over and fell asleep again, and when he woke up next day, he didn't remember the dream at all.